Only here a short time, so lay your life on the line. Living on borrowed time. Living on borrowed time.
Welcome to Lion Zone, where you learn to be a lion and not the prey in a world of hungry jackals and vicious wolves. I'm your host, Steve Johan. For more about me, go to stevejohan.com. You can find me on Substack under stevejohan.substack.com. I've got a great show lined up for you. But before I introduce my guest, I want to start things off with a song that will set the stage for today's show. So here's a song from the past. Let's take a listen to this gentleman.
1969, I wrote this next song, and Tim Hardin recorded it first, had a pretty big hit with it, and kind of balanced the books. Come and sing a simple song of freedom. Sing it like you never sang before. Let it fill the air, tell the people everywhere. We the people here don't want a war. Hey there, Mr. Black Man, can you hear me? I don't want your diamonds or your game. I just want to be someone known to you as me. And I will bet my life you want the same. Come and sing a simple song of freedom. Sing it like you've never sung before. Let it fill the air, tell the people everywhere. We the people here don't want a war. 700 million, are you listening? Most of what you read is made of lies.
Indeed.
But speaking one to one, ain't it everybody's son to wake to in the morning when we rise? So come and sing a simple song of freedom.
All right. So, Bill, do you remember that song?
Well, if I was going to guess, I'd take Arlo Guthrie.
Close, but actually it is Bobby
Keith
Darin.
Bobby
Darin. Song of Freedom. It says, come and sing a simple song of freedom. Sing it like you've never sung before. Let it fill the air. Tell the people everywhere. We the people here don't want a war. Hey there, Mr. Black Man, can you hear me? I don't want your diamonds or your game. I just want to be someone known to you as me. And I will bet my life you want the same. 700 million, are you listening? Most of what you hear, what you read is made of lies. But speaking one to one ain't everybody's son to wake up in the morning when you rise. And it says, Brother Solzhenitsyn, are you busy? If not, won't you drop your friend a line? Tell me if the man who is plowing up your land has got war machine on his mind. No doubt some folks enjoy doing battle like presidents, prime ministers, and kings. So all build them shelves where you can fight among themselves, leave the people be who you love to sing. And so I thought this would be a very appropriate song because it's about we the people. We didn't vote for the war. We don't vote for what goes on in our government. And yet we should be the ones that are voting for what we do. And so, Bill, you're on with Tactical Civics. Tactical Civics is a organization that is a educational-driven organization where you learn about our Constitution, how to use your rights to make the needed changes to return the government back to we the people. Instead of me saying more, I will let you, Bill, give me a little explanation about what your organization does and also a brief history on how you got involved with Tactical Civics.
Well, thanks, Steve. Thanks for having me on your program. You'll hear all kinds of noise and chaos here as the dog comes and goes and the phone rings and so on. Such is life. Such is life. I'm in Clearfield County, Pennsylvania, right in the middle of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. If you connect the two diagonals, the lines will cross pretty much where I am. And we've been on the land here for a couple hundred years. Tactical Civics is a Christian mission to the United States, the goal of which is to restore the Republic by enforcing the Constitution. Constitution's never been enforced. It's the highest law of the land, but we have to enforce it for it to be law at all. And of course, it starts with three words, we the people, so that tells you who's responsible for it. I like to say Stephen Covey talked about responsibility in his books. Someone said, if it's to be, it's up to me. That's a good quote. Pogo, if you're old enough to remember Pogo, the comic strip, he said, we have met the enemy and he is us. I heard a fellow say he wanted to pass out hand mirrors to everybody so they could see both the problem and the solution together for a change. Constitutional enforcement. We believe that most of the problems we currently face would not be problems had the Constitution been enforced. Pick one of the big ones. You can go back and say, well, gee, that's unconstitutional. And then the final point is citizens of the Republic have a duty to participate in the organs of government that provide oversight and enforcement of the Constitution. And that's really the responsible part. I was looking for answers, as many people have been over the last several years. There's what's going wrong, what's causing it, and how do we fix it? Well, what's going wrong are all broad strokes. If you read the preamble to the Constitution, we're not doing those things. Common defense doesn't feel like it's being provided for. A more perfect union, I'm not sure we're getting that. Provide the blessings of liberty for ourselves and our posterity seems to be in doubt. That's what's wrong. What's causing it? And I was listening one night to a podcast, a panel by three people. They seem to have some notoriety: Scott McKay, Mike Jaco, and Nino Rodriguez. They were interviewing David Zuniga. David Zuniga is the founder of Tactical Civics, and for an hour, he deftly answered all their questions, promoting his book, The Great Reset. And while the program was on, I went ahead and ordered the book because I wanted to know what was in this book. It just had the solutions. After the show, I called Scott and I said, Scott, I think you're onto something with this Great Reset. I ordered a book. He said, read it and call me back. So I did so. And for the last year, I've been working with him and others to get the message out. I'm currently the Republic-wide promotional coordinator for Tactical Civics, which basically means I get to talk to you. And I'm what we call the air game. We talk to large audiences like yours this way and small audiences through our ground game, our seminar program, and so on. The why is very simple. I want this solved. I want it solved. Colton Ray is my first great grandchild. He's 4 weeks old now. And I expect in 20 or so years, he's going to start asking me questions like, what was I doing during such a time as this, that whatever the conditions are then are what they are. And I hope I have some competent answers for him. Sitting on my butt watching TV isn't probably going to be a good one. I'm not against bowling or pool, but leading my bowling or pool league or dart league probably isn't going to be an answer that I'm going to be able to live with. And so that's what drives me. The cause of the problem, according to David Zuniga, and you and I talked about this, is ungodliness. If you read Romans chapter 1, verse 18 to the fold, as you said it, Paul says, and it's interesting, Paul never repeated himself, but he repeated himself 3 times here. Because the Romans had turned away from God, God gave them over to their stupidity. And then he listed 24 things, which sounds like a full agenda in Congress any given day of the week that they're working. And there are several that are noteworthy. One is, although they thought themselves wise, they were as fools.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't there a lot of that going on? and I'll leave it to the viewer to go and do the back end research on that. But there's another verse later on in the New Testament that says, if my people who are called by my name will turn from their wicked ways, humble themselves, kneel down and pray, I will heal their land. That's a promise. And I considered these things as I was new to the program and said, really? Spiritual war? Is that what we're going to go with? And, I reflected the Q people talk about it's going to be biblical, or they talk about the epic struggle of good over evil, or dark and light. And so, okay. But then I remembered that the global communists in their founding document, the Communist Manifesto, dedicated it to Lucifer, and Karl Marx's chief goal was to get Christ off the throne. So they think it's a spiritual war. And if the enemy thinks it's a spiritual war and that's how they're coming at us, it seems prudent for us to fight back in a spiritual war. I've been telling people, if you don't think it's a spiritual war, you're already a casualty. Apathy is just as good as anything else. Demons don't have to come against you when you don't believe. And so that's the why it's happening. The what do we do about it is the tactical civics plan, which I can list now or later.
Well, we're gonna get into that a little later. I want to kind of front load the show with a little history of our country, and then lead into where we are today, and then discuss what you're doing. I signed up, just full disclosure, I signed up for the group, paid my $5, and I'll be a $5 a month member, but I've got to build the time. So, and I figure this is going to be a long slog because it's going to be education. It's like going through a evening course if you're going to do it. My son took one. It took 2 years for him to do it while he was working during the day. And many of us take courses. And so I look at this as part of a long-term plan to right the ship of state. So I want us to take a moment and reflect a little bit back. Let's begin by our country, our history. What makes America so different from all other countries when it was, even when it began from the very beginning, and to the point where our founding fathers, that would be those who were the signers of our Declaration and of independence, and ultimately our Constitution, the framers of our Bill of Rights and stuff. But before that, there was another group, generations that came before that group, that laid the foundation for this country. And, I think of Roger Williams back in 1640 and his works that he was doing and setting the ball for actual religious freedom, which people don't know. They need to do a little research on this man, because even in his time, the colonies had already, hey, this colony's this denomination, this colony's this denomination, and if you don't go if you don't go along with the program, you're going to be an outcast, and it's not going to go easy for you. So he ultimately, through a lot of perils and trials, fled and found the Rhode Island and spent 15 months over in England and on the seas, and then came back and purchased this from the Native Americans who ran that area, and then formed a religious free, basically the ability to worship however you want or not how you want, with no religious persecution, which ended up being, I believe that was why that got put into our Constitution. But let's talk about that, Bill, from your standpoint, from what you've learned through tactical civics and maybe your own studies. Talk to us about what makes the United States so different, in America, so different from other countries prior to its existence.
You ask the people 400 years ago what the purpose of America was, they tell you to worship Jesus, uplift Jesus. Why do you think we rode in those little boats the whole way over here? That's what the whole point was. We couldn't do it over there, so we came over here to do it the way we saw fit. If you do surveys, and they do them still, most people consider themselves Christians to some degree or another. The rest of the world certainly sees us as a Christian nation. Only a secular minority who seem to have grabbed the microphone out of the hands for the rest of us are shouting anything opposite that. It is characteristic of America's Christian nature that we tolerate views that are hostile to our own. I don't know if we're misapplying the doctrine of the weaker brother. I'm just not sure how it happens, but we give ground rather than stand. And I'm not going to say it's wrong. I'm not going to say it's evil. I am going to say that at some point you have to stand. You cannot retreat indefinitely. Each time we did something great in this country, there was an awakening that preceded it. 1730s, there was an awakening. 1830s, there was an awakening. In the 1930s, there was an awakening for civil rights that time. And I believe there's an awakening now. It is less organized. It is less from the pulpit and more from your studio, but it's still very real. People of faith are still out there. I think it's Barna said that 25% of the members of mainline Christian denominations have left in search of Jesus. Of course, Asbury was this year. I don't know if you followed the Asbury outpouring or not. I did. I couldn't get away from it. It almost seems like the Holy Spirit's willing to skip a couple generations, go right for the young people when it needs to. Some of the splintering I see in the denominations, that's not new. That's
No.
historic. We splinter
Yep.
all the time. The farmer in me wonders if that's not a form of pruning and propagation.
I
Keep
believe
the
it.
spirit fresh.
Yes.
What we do at Tactical Civics is and will be an act of faith. It will be a manifestation of our belief. It will provide for the diversity of thought that we've always had. But it will, just like in Rhode Island, it will cause a cessation of that which seeks to limit that diversity.
Yes. That's exactly right. There are powers that do not want things to go the freedom route. The whole history of God, you go back to the founding of the papers, the Constitution. I've been to the Library of Congress. I've been to, I believe it's Benjamin Franklin's library, or they reconstructed in there, and you see the books on the shelves. And he had books from all over the world, and they were researching everything from the Bible, the Quran, the Roman writings, other governments, and they were trying to seek the best route possible to form a more perfect union, a more perfect country where freedom reigned and responsibility was the underpinning part of that. And I think a lot of people have, freedom to do whatever we want. Well, no. Freedom without restraint and responsibility leads to chaos and slovenliness. But I think about when we go back to those early days, you think about this, we've talked, we'll get into this. Again, other countries had kings at the time that our government was being established. There was another revolution going on that took place not too long around our time, was called the French Revolution. And that had a whole different aspect to it. It wasn't based in Jesus and Christ. It was based in something completely different. But our founding father, go ahead.
The writings of Rousseau, I think, were foundational to the French Revolution, but they included liberté, something else, fraternité, and equality. And so they were going from the basis that not that we're all created equal, but we're all entitled to an equal outcome. Well, that's got problems from the beginning. I was looking for the scripture, but we are opposed by principality, not by flesh and blood, but by principalities. If you read through that, that's the times we're in.
Yes.
And I'm constantly trying to get people to wake up to the fact that there's an unseen world around you, and that it is at work in the seen world today. I tell the young people here, there's a mind, a body, and a spirit. We trip over the body all the time. It's fairly obvious, bang your elbows and so on. The mind is where we think we are, because we're all very well educated. The spirit, people are dubious about. So I asked them, have you ever been to a funeral and you looked in the box and said, hey, that guy doesn't look like he used to look? It's because he's no longer clothed in the spirit. The spirit is not present in the body. That's why he looks different. And there's about a 60-40 acceptance of that. They can start seeing the point. It's funny, the older you get, the thinner the veil is, and the more you realize the truth of the spiritual world. Then I tell them that the beast lives in the body. That's where rage is. That's where the powerful emotions are, fight and flight and so on. Satan tempts us in the mind. When he came to Eve, he said, surely you will not die. That's a logical argument. Surely you will not die. The temptations of Christ were all intellectual temptations. It's in the spirit where we have hope, where we have connection, where we have the ability to transcend the other parts. And so I'm very intrigued when I read something that was written a couple thousand years ago, and they clearly identify what we're seeing now. Sadly, I have a bit I used to do. Most people want someone else to do the work. They put the kids on the bus. I'll come back in 12 years. They'll be model citizens. No, they won't. They won't know anything if you didn't tell them. Go to the doctor, give me a pill. Don't talk to me about nutrition, water, walking, or anything else. Just give me a pill. Politicians, send them to the Capitol, wish them well. We're voting this year. 2 years from now, we'll check on you. No. And then there's religion, and that's where we expect the minister to talk to Jesus, read the scripture, tell us what was covered, and get us out in time for the picnic. And I've always pointed out those are 4 corporate organizations that are failing right now: corporate education, corporate politics, corporate medicine, and corporate religion.
Yes.
And so my son-in-law, I forget what he said, but I said, you have a smartphone? Yeah. He said, you can download a Bible on there, multiple translations, it's searchable. I recommend it. The Holy Spirit was sent for you. You could read the scripture, and with the help of the Holy Spirit, you could get an interpretation no one has ever had before. That's the value of you reading it. But guess now who's responsible? We do not live in a world anymore where we can go, well, the preacher said, someone else said. You're accountable. You're individually accountable now. And that's true there, and that's true in tactical civics. The citizen is individually accountable for what they do or don't do. It is we the people, and most people are treating their public like people treat a rental car. They claim no ownership, no agency. Well, I don't care if the oil needs changed or not. It's not my car. They should have changed it before they rented it, or they can change it when I get it back. That doesn't work. How we got there is a whole different discussion. But we must have the mind of the people who wrote the founding documents. And I like to point out those were all business owners. They were all proprietors. They knew that the buck stopped with them. And it just had to be hard for them to conceive of a nation that didn't care. Just didn't care. Somebody else says, I elected the guy. I voted. Got my little sticker says I voted.
Well, if we think about back in that day, people lived on the the raggedy edge. There was no safety net. We didn't have a feudal system in the United States, unlike the other countries. We didn't have a king that was a beneficial, this beneficial king that was benevolent king that oversaw us, and we were the serfs, and we did our land, um, and my wife and I and son just watched Far and Away with Cruise and Kidman in it, and it's a great movie. Covers a lot of interesting span of our own history of what was going on in Ireland and the landowner and how the people were pretty much in abject poverty most of the time, and how they came here. They were given the opportunity to come and start a new land of their own. But we, for hundreds of years before the Declaration of Independence was even written, had been living like that, paying our taxes to the king, but pretty much living our own lives as we saw fit, dying from whatever, injuring ourselves from whatever, living on roots and berries. And there was no vegetarians, quite frankly, in America until our century, because you would have died if you would try to rely on veggies to support yourself. They hunted, they fished, they raised their own livestock. And the point is like this. You said this, having myself visited some of the port of uh, Portland, Maine, and seeing the slip in the building where they used to come in and how they shipped out and shipped in. And it would take weeks and weeks and weeks for that boat to go from America back to Britain. It would take weeks and weeks and weeks, or go to Jamaica, or go to wherever. It wasn't like today. So you're right. People lived, they're invested in here, and they died here, and their next generation picked it up. Grandpa, great grandpa started the farmstead. Then the son picked it up, and then the son after that picked it up, and the son after that, unless they were a merchant. And then they did merchant in the towns. But if you had a farm, it was multi-generational. And yet people understood that we needed a government that was going to be responsible for overseeing everybody's welfare. And so let's bring it up forward through, we had the Revolutionary War, and we got our country, but it wasn't very long. 1812 came around and Britain came back. Have you done any research on the War of 1812 and the re-incursion of Britain coming back over here? And I often wonder, I haven't done my research other than being where they did the fights. You have any thoughts on, was that bankers trying to come back and collect debts, or trying to?
Something like that. I want to bounce backwards a few years ahead of that, if I may.
Yep.
Daniel Ogden is my great grandfather. He's the first settler here in Clearfield, Pennsylvania. He came here when he was 62. It was the 8th time he had moved in 40 years.
Wow.
Just think that one through. He and his son William came up the Susquehanna from Lock Haven by canoe. They portaged around trees and rocks, some class 5 whitewater down through there. And they found an island with no trees on it, a clear field, as it were. And at the head of the island, they built a cabin with the help of the local Indians. And then Daniel went back to Lock Haven and got Eleanor and the other 6 kids. They walked up along the shore line to get here. That was 1797.
Yes.
The first marriage of county residents was William Ogden and a Bloom, and they had 16 kids that lived. She, by the way, lived to be 101. Okay, talk about diet, exercise, nutrition, no pharmacy, no chiropractic, no surgery, no. I mean, I'm very fascinated with all that. I saw a documentary not long ago about the chestnut forest down the Appalachians. The chestnuts would fall and be inches thick in the forest floor. It was a great forest. And the more kids you had, the more chestnuts you could go collect and bring in. Very nutritious. You turn your livestock out and they would eat the chestnuts. How do you fatten a hog and why do you slaughter them at Thanksgiving? Well, they've gathered up all the chestnuts, is the answer. The Great Chestnut Blight was the largest environmental disaster in world history. Somebody brought a foreign chestnut into New York, and the blight spread down the Appalachian, wiped out the great forest. People were actually living in the stumps. That's how big these trees were. They made
Wow.
stump houses. They provided great wood for furniture, for building, for blacksmith. I mean, it just because I've had quite. What do they live on here? There's a story of Ogden walking to Snowshoe, Pennsylvania, to get 50 pounds of salt and bring it back because they were going to cure a hog at Thanksgiving. And my first question is, where did they get the hog and what did they feed it? Well, I now know. They just turned them loose in the great forest that was here and let them forage for it. Back in those days, I asked a lot of groups rhetorically, if there was a problem, which police force did Ogden contact? The state police? The county police? None of the above. There weren't any police.
No.
If there was a problem with erosion and sedimentation in the local waterway, did DEP come in? Who came? Nobody. He was the government. Who was code enforcement? They were. Who were trash collection? They were. Who handled sewage issues? They did. And of course, the early occupation, even before farming, was homesteading. And here's a guy that moved repeatedly and reestablished homesteads where it wasn't so crowded. That was his motivator. He, by the way, lived to be 87. Veteran of the Revolution up in upstate New York and all those travels, lived to be 87. I just marvel at that. Made his own clothes. The Indians liked him because he could pull teeth. He had many skills. The boy made a grist mill. It had one piece of metal in it. Everything else was wooden. It was a mechanical wonder people would come to see. Family dinners, family gatherings were essentially municipal meetings. We do that here. My youngest child lives a putter away to me to the south. Her twin sister lives a 9-iron to the east, and their older brother's probably a good 2-wood down there to the south and east. And when we get together like we did for birthdays here at the end of April, or I think there were 14 of us, in addition to eating and laughing and celebrating, we also have some municipal discussions. Proper way to use the dumpster. Who's going to handle the lawn and garden care this year? Where should we put the corn crop? Those are all municipal discussions. We didn't have any elections. It was people assembling to discuss. And if there's a problem, whose dog's doing what in whose yard, we deal with that too. So too did the founders and the early settlers. But when enough people aggregated in an area, instead of me carrying a musket while I plow, Ogden was driven out of a couple places in New York during the uprisings. They lost one child to the Indians. The Indians killed him. So it was a constant tension. Instead of carrying your musket, you would hire paid law enforcement to do some things for you. You would hire people to be municipal authorities or whatever needed done. You would call it an age of specialization. If I could feed my family by doing all the blacksmith work for a community, well, that's a specialized thing. If I could feed my family by doing all the grain production or having a grist mill, people would bring their grain. So too with government. Government was simply the community got together and hired people to do a specific function. You asked about the War of 1812. What I know about it is Britain wasn't in very good shape to have to deal with us, but they thought if they could come over here and in particular take New Orleans, Louisiana, they could get a better truce at the end of that war. We were also in a weakened condition, in part because we used paper money during the Revolutionary War. The Continental wasn't worth anything.
No.
The other side of that, of course, The Battle of New Orleans got us a president who short-circuited the bank, Jackson, and there was quite an age of prosperity up until the 1860s because of all that.
It's interesting. You've got that history that many of us, many of my listeners, myself included, have no connection with our forefathers being on the same land in the same region. My father-in-law and mother-in-law, they live in Oregon, and he was raised on a century farm. So, and now he still owns it. And now, like you said, we, his siblings, the four kids, and the grandchildren are all sitting around at the table the other day and via phone, in person, whatever, discussing what are we going to do about the farm? What are we going to do about the assets of the grandparents? How do we protect this? How do we keep it in the family? If we're going to keep it in the family, what are we going to do with it? And then grandkids, do you see value in, oh yeah, we want to keep it. We don't know how to deal with that right now. We're in different areas of the country, blah, blah, blah. But we see value. Hey, what if we take this and make this and do? So we had that discussion, and we're still having that discussion now. This is an ongoing discussion. And yesterday we met for Mother's Day, and two of my sons were there, and we had some discussions. And you're exactly right. We were discussing, call it politics, the civic duty of each of us towards one another and how to help each other out, giving advice, thing. And so that's how our country survived for hundreds of years. And then more and more people come in, you have more and more tensions. That's when you said you start building up these structures, what we call government, to start building fences of laws to protect one another from each other. And, you know, that's how laws are put in place to protect you or your neighbor against the actions or the bad actions of another individual, be it willful or just, hey, I didn't know that was your land and my cows are over there and it's grazing. I didn't know that. Okay, we need to put boundary lines. We need to make sure that, and so that was going on. With this in mind, Bill, I think about, you just said up to 1860. I want, before we get to kind of what really changed here, I want people to understand, here's a following citation from USA.gov. The Constitution of the United States divides the federal government into three branches: legislative, executive, and judicial. This ensures that no individual or group have that too much power. Each branch of government can change acts of the other branches. The president can veto legislation created by Congress. He or she also nominates heads of federal agencies and high court appointees. The Congress confirms or rejects the president's nominees. It can also remove the president from office in exceptional circumstances. The justice of the Supreme Court, nominated by the president, confirmed by the Senate, can overturn unconstitutional laws. Now get that, unconstitutional laws. So with that in mind, let's talk about what took place in the United States, in our country, in 1860s, that basically started really disrupting things from what we just read and really started pivoting into a different system and a different approach. So let's talk about a little bit about that all the states had their own rights. They were all, because we didn't even talk about state rights here, but each state was kind of its own country, was it not?
They were their own countries.
Yes.
The purpose of centralized government was to mediate the disputes between and among the various states, ensure a more perfect union, I think is the language.
Yes. But what happened when the South were, I have not done deep digging in this, but I am at a point now where I know I would be called a revisionist historian. I no longer buy it was about slavery. There's actually a book that says it's not about slavery. It wasn't about slavery. Having visited the Northeast, having visited the Southeast, um, I come to realize what took place was what became known for many is the war of aggression. And they basically salt and burned down the South. They salted the world, the earth, and they burned down everything that was kind of available except for what they wanted to stay, you know, like Savannah and several other areas that they said, oh no, this is valuable for us for what we want to do. But most cities down there were burned to the ground. And so talk to us about how that change really became the transition, I believe, the transition point, the war between the states, the Civil War, the war of aggression. How did that transform our country from what it was prior to that?
During the drafting of the Constitution, there was a contest between Hamilton and Jefferson, I think, for a strong central government versus a weak central government and strong state governments. The Civil War simply seems to be a contest about that issue. It appears to have been a war that weakened, if not ended, federalism. The war was fought between and among militias. Well, of course, you say the word militia, people clutch their pearls now. Various laws were passed to change the construct. Robert E. Lee would not serve in the Union Army because he could not oppose his beloved Virginia. Well, we can't have that. Of course, at the time of the Constitution, you couldn't send military groups across international borders. By the time we get to the First World War, we're sending militias to Europe, literally sending the state militias to Europe. That's clearly unconstitutional. And so the dominant power of the South was that they were very strong on states' rights. And as the contest was made over what we can and can't do in each state as it's admitted to the Union, it became a states' rights issue and a balance of power in Congress. There was one piece of legislation for every slave state. You have to admit a free state, and so on. Somebody said they postponed a fight they could have had in 1775, but for the sake of independence, they delayed it. And everybody knew they delayed it. They wrote some things into the Constitution that weren't going to stand. By 1865, it got resolved. And for those of us on this side, we have to be smart enough to know that victors write histories.
Yes.
That maybe everything's not exactly like, and of course, lucky is the child that has a good history teacher that makes history alive and vivid. Better still is the adult who's willing to sit and do their own due diligence and go through bibliographies and learn. I was on a podcast with somebody and they said, you know, the founders were geniuses. I said, maybe. You know, they're sharp guys, I guess. Or maybe they're no smarter than you and I, but they had a real thirst for hunger and they studied it constantly. They read Locke and Montesquieu. They talked about it in the taverns. They talked about it at church. It was their constant topic. And so when you're out and you have a chance to be quiet and listen to your surroundings, what's being talked about? Is it liberty? Probably not. Ought it to be? I find it interesting that you can't travel now without watching your network programming on the screens.
I know it's in the airports, it's in everywhere.
How many restaurants can you eat in where they have multiple screens around the room? They're called sports bars. And okay, I didn't have to go there. I got that. I also don't have to look at the screen. You know, I can tune that out. we are being programmed at a level higher than anybody else on earth right now. And I think it wasn't Napoleon Hill, it was another one. Earl Nightingale, the sad truth is that most people just don't think.
Yes.
It's a lost art. Most things are rote. If you ask people in the morning why they go to work, they would say, well, everybody goes to work. Okay. And I learned a long time ago that I make blood to live. I don't live to make blood. You know, that you have to get things in right perspective. So too it is with the country. You were reading the section about the three branches of government, and all I can think of is that whole thing is about how I'm setting up a company to run. Within that company, that's what they do. I'm
Yes.
the owner. I'm over here. I'm not in the company looking up and around. I'm over here as an owner, you know, albeit an absentee owner in many cases. The Supreme Court's a referee on a football field. They don't officiate the owners. The owner's sitting up in the box doing what he wants. It's his team. Actually, the owner has input on what the referees do and don't rule. Well, that is the case here too, but the vast majority of the citizenry is unaware of that. And then I get statements. Somebody on a podcast said, well, they didn't, my daughter went to the best schools and they didn't teach her the Constitution. I said, this is going to sting. You didn't teach her.
I didn't do it. Yeah, I was a absentee constitutional teacher myself because I didn't get it taught, and I've been. You're exactly right. We've been programmed our entire life not to think about it as being important, other than seeing the placard, doing our pledges, singing our anthems. Other than that, we kind of trust that everything is just being done accordingly, and then you realize it has not in my lifetime been done accordingly, correctly. It's we've abdicated our responsibility. I have abdicated my responsibility for being involved in my local politics, in my statewide politics, and in my federal politics, nationwide. I mean, I voted, I try to educate myself, but I'm not even spending the time contacting my representatives and saying, I don't like what you're doing, or I like what you're doing. I've done a little bit of that, and I'm like, that's at least a starting point. So getting connected with you guys is like going to be the fire underneath my behind.
Yes.
Take me to the next level, because I do know that if I took a class. Dick Armey had a whole thing. He was out pitching his book, and it was also another group that was teaching how to be involved actively within your political sphere, which is build a relationship with your representatives and be that voice for your community, because they don't hear from anybody. And even whether you like them or not, it doesn't matter. You build that voice so that they're hearing from you, and now you can speak into their language, into their life. I've done that, and then I failed to stay with it. But that's the representational government that we have. That me, Steve Johann, I am the government. I'm the telling my legislators what to do, what not to do. Because they're not supposed to be there because, solar power guys want to get a bunch of goody money, and they want their positions pushed, and they're giving them money for their running for their positions. And I don't have any money, but I have a voice. So you're right. I'm just saying, just visiting my 64 years of on this earth, of going, I have been involved, I haven't, I have, and now I'm like, you know what? I need to set the pace. I need to get involved, which is, before we get into that part, I want to ask you this. A lot of people right now, and we see this every 2 years, every 4 years, everybody seems to forget what the person they're pushing to get into office has actually done in the past, and all the evil that they did. And they just say, well, it's the best of both it's the lesser of two evils, so I've got to vote for the lesser of two evils. Steve, if I don't vote for so-and-so, so-and-so's still going to stay in there. And I'm like, I'm voting for someone you don't even understand because they want to change. They want to do what you and I are trying to do. I can no longer abide by voting for someone who I know screwed the country over 4 years ago. And we're still living through the ramifications of that. And now he's out there talking about blah, 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 that being Trump. And Biden, I never voted for, and I couldn't vote for him. But talk to us about us putting so much faith and effort into our savior candidates and how that's gotten us away from being responsible.
Washington urged us not to do parties. He thought parties would be a terrible,
I hate parties.
terrible thing. If party politics would solve the problem, we wouldn't still be asking the question. It is divisive, and division is a strategy. And so my dad's sitting here, he's 92 and a half, lifelong Democrat. He's not an evil man. I won't hear that he's evil. He receives mail from the Democrat Governors Association. It's in a white envelope with a blue stripe, and it says, "Have you seen what Republicans are up to?" I get the other mail.
Yep.
It's in a white envelope with a red stripe. "Have you seen what the Democrats are up to?" And I think it's from the same people.
Same people.
Every delinquent teenager knows that if they can get the parents in an argument, the parents aren't looking at the sketchy stuff the teen's been doing last weekend. They're too busy arguing. And so I don't do division anymore. I don't do Democrat, Republican.
Neither do I.
don't do black, white. I don't do young, old, urban, rural. I don't do taste great, less filling, Ford or Chevy, Steelers, Cowboys. I do us and the people that work for us. I'm willing to talk about that construct. We sit on an oversight board called We the People, and they are public servants. They have a list of 17 tasks to complete federally. If they're not attending to those 17, they're stealing time. And if they're exceeding that list, they're stealing authority. In either case, they're stealing, and we need to address that. I can't fault them. We all learn these expressions: when the cat's away, the mice will play. When the teacher's out of the classroom long enough, even a good kid will whip an eraser every now and then. We cannot be absentee owners and expect things to run the way we want them to run. It isn't that way. There's a parable in Scripture where Jesus starts it by saying, "And then the master returned."
I know that parable of the wine of the vineyard, and it was not a nice. It was
Well,
not a nice ending.
the master has to return. That's all.
That's all. That's right. And we're the master. We're the master. So when I'm thinking about this, I'm going to read the book first. Right here, The Great Reset. I figure I'll read this because I can do it in the evening where I like to do my reading, underline it, make notations. Then I will step into the classes, start walking through it. I started filling out all the stuff you have to do, and then I had to quit. But I want us just so people know, I am what I call an independent. I am a Christ-following individual, and I'm trying to be responsible for my family, for myself, for my community, where possible, my church community for certain. I, for years, have studied Scripture, taught. I lead Bible studies all the time. I even had a class on how to interpret the Bible and talk about how your brain can get completely indoctrinated by false teaching, and yet you think this is the view of the Scriptures that everybody has, and then you realize, you get the wake-up call and go, oh my gosh, I've been seeing things wrong for 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years. Yeah, you have, because you were in a closed mindset. So now I'm realizing I've been in a closed mind when it comes to understanding my role, other than just calling my legislators stuff. Before we get into now you talking to me, ABC of tactical civics, what I did notice that's very intriguing, and I think I'm in my search right now, is I want to bring this up, is that you have David Zuniga has set up Tactical Civics as a nonprofit trust, and it's in a foreign country. And he and I had a chat on the phone. This was probably a year ago or 6 months ago. And he briefly sketched out what he's doing, but I didn't. It was like so fast, so quick, I didn't get to. Are you familiar with the structure and the purpose behind that? And that how can we as individuals set out to do the same thing? Because that's what I want to do with my organizations, my businesses, my family ownings, everything. I want to put it in a protective zone, which is currently legal for us, before we're able to go into the tactical civics in the long run. I consider tactical civics as the long game. I consider what David has done with placing the tactical civics and his own stuff under these umbrellas as the short game for right now, and even the long-term gain. So do you know anything about that? And if not, be honest.
I've read it. I believe you can find in the book that you just held up in the indices or appendices, information on the America Again Trust, which lays all that out. You'll also find an extended article on the training center. The basic purpose of it is to keep ne'er-do-wells from messing with it. I explained that to Scott McKay. He said, well, I did the same thing with my Patriot Street Fighter. It's in a trust too. Same reason, he said. So it's a common thing. I'm not a trust lawyer. I haven't done that. So beyond that, I don't have much comment.
Okay. Yeah, we had Scott on the show on the Flame show. This is the Lion Zone, but I also produced the Flame podcast, and we had Scott on a couple weeks ago, and he's really into the tactical civics now. He's really promoting that, which is great. And so I am right. I will read the book. Good. That'll be uh, again. It's we the Great We Set by David M. Zuniga, Suniga, for those who are listening. I'm going to look through and read through the whole thing and then explore that, because I'm like, boy, this really is on top of my head right now. I want to do all I can to protect my assets. Having just dealt with my dad's his will and all of his assets, because he just passed away last year. And it was pretty smooth because I was on all the paperwork, but I'm like, I want to protect. So let's step into the tactical civics. How is this system structured? How is it going to solve our problems? Let's just talk about David's goal of this organization and his fellow founders. Let's talk about that. How was the concept and the founding, and then how this is going to help us as members, and ultimately us as a country, because it's going to take a lot more people than who's involved right now to get that tipping point. But I do believe there is an awakening, and that I'm part of it, and you are too. So take us through that please.
There's 4 points in what I call the tactical civics plan. I keep it simple. Point number 2, remember the goal is to enforce the Constitution. That's what we're going to do so that we can have the blessings of liberty for ourselves and our posterity. We're going to enforce the Constitution. Point 2, we're going to restore the county grand jury, the investigating jury. We had it for 800 years. Brought it with us from England. It's a body of the citizenry. There's a book in Tactical Civics called Grand Jury Awake, which makes a nice primer about that. This is a group drawn from the voter rolls, sworn by the judge. The judge exits the room. They are equal in authority to the judge. They are superior in authority to the sheriff or the DA. Their purpose is to investigate. You could also say proctor. Remember when you were taking the test and the teacher walked between the rows to make sure you weren't cheating? You weren't cheating, but he still walked between the rows, didn't he? So too with the grand jury, they can investigate to make sure that our public servants are functioning as they are supposed to be functioning. It's oversight. If they find someone in violation of their job duties, their authority, etc., they can file an indictment, and these people can defend themselves in front of the 12-man jury. If they're guilty and it's a serious crime, they can be removed from office. Then we'll have us a special election. I maintain that you take any 25, number could vary, but 25 people who shower after work, blue collar people, they know what theft, corruption, and cheating looks like. It won't take long for them to say, yeah, there's cause. And that's all that the grand jury does. Yeah, there's cause. It is an independent organization. The other organization is the county militia. Militia is not extra constitutional, it's intra constitutional. Militia is simply law enforcement, and they work hand in hand with the grand jury. Imagine, if you will, where a county sheriff is abusing their office, and the system says we want to investigate, subpoena, search. So, and who do we send for that? The deputies? They're not going to go. And so the militia, the lawful militia, can, with proper authority from the grand jury, go and execute a search warrant or a subpoena and so on. This is not the Montana 3% looking to kill John and Beth Dutton this year on Yellowstone. This is the lawful militia. The Second Amendment, now most people can quote half of it, but what it says is a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, comma, the right of people to keep and bear arms shall not be questioned. We're having discussions about magazines and firearm types because we quit having a discussion over the viability of militia. Militia, and again, I take you back to 1797. Who was law enforcement then? We were. Why? Well, because that's who was here, was us. And that never changes. It is analogous to a volunteer fire department. Just because a couple places have paid fire departments doesn't mean we should disband our volunteers. And I will remind you that firemen and policemen come after the problem starts.
Always, always. Same thing with, quite frankly, same thing with medical doctors.
Sure.
Always after the problem.
After the problem. And so we're going to restore these organizations. I think it's number 15 in the list of 17 duties says Congress shall call forth the militia. I point out that call forth means it has to have already been constituted. You can't call it forth if it doesn't exist. Shall call forth the militia to enforce the laws of the land, repel invaders, and put down insurrections, all three of which would have been handy in the last couple of years. And so having this organization seems to make sense. There should be state militias, but the federal government has done an effective job of corrupting state governments. There's no reason why county governments, by ordinance, cannot have these two bodies that are independent of the people who live there. And that's the key, who live there. And so that's number two. Number three is there's a pending amendment. It's a couple hundred years old. Connecticut did not turn in their homework. Maybe that's why I don't have any friends in Connecticut, because I keep saying that. This would be the law of the land. It was the first of the Bill of Rights, but Connecticut didn't turn in their papers. It limits a federal congressional district to 50,000 people. Currently, in your congressional district, there's about 750,000 of you. You mentioned at the top of the show that you're not being represented. No wonder there's 750,000 of you for one representative. How does that work? The best he can do is take a survey. How do you even talk to a guy that's got 750,000? So we need 27 states to ratify this. All it has to do is be voted up or down by state legislatures. And I can start to name them. Texas would vote for this. North and South Dakota would vote for this. Idaho would vote for it. I'll bet Wyoming and Montana would vote. It's just not hard for me to run it and come up to 27. Once that's passed, that creates 6,880 Congress people. There's nowhere to meet in Washington, no office space. I believe tactical civics will help identify, vet, and elect these new Congress people. After they're sworn in a football stadium or whatever, their first act of business will be to pass the Bring Congress Home Act, which creates the first distributed legislature in world history. They can live and work among the people who vote for them, all 50,000 of them. Nate Kane, if you know Nate's running for Congress down West Virginia. There are primaries tomorrow. Nate wants to introduce that bill in Congress. He said on somebody's program, good idea, Nate. They can attend Congress by Zoom, kind of like we're doing. No need for us to foot the bill for them to fly back and forth all the time. Speaker of the House, when she lived in San Francisco, got the good flights back and forth all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Doesn't have to be that way. When Trump was in office, they called him a fascist. I looked it up. Fascism is when big government and big business collude to abuse the citizen. Big pharma, big tech, big media, big medical, big education, whatever it is. When Congress lives at home and they have to buy their groceries the same place you buy them, when they're in the same church you attend, when you see them on the sidewalk and can ask them questions, fascism stops
Yes.
right now.
Yeah.
Incorporated in the Bring Congress Home Act are things like term limits. No need to go there forever. A couple of terms ought to be enough for you. A reduced amount of staff, 2 computers, 1 office, that kind of thing. The 2 computers are, if they call you to testify before Congress, you just go to the local office and use the other computer. You don't have to travel either, foot the bill for it. Those are the 2, 3, and 4. Step 1 is to found chapters in every county and populate them. We're in 54% of all counties right now. We've grown by a factor of 12x in the last year. I'm the numbers guy. Somebody says this will take forever. I says, no, it won't. And then we go about demonstrating that because the people are ready. Every day somebody's doing something that helped the people get ready to take action. The Great Awakening is usually caused by somebody shaking you. So, wake up, it's time to go. Once we have Congress home, they will then be living under state law in the jurisdiction covered by the grand jury and militia. And in Pennsylvania, for example, if someone fails to uphold their oath of office, that's called perjury. Up here, that's a felony. They're convicted of felony, they're out. You do that once or twice, everybody else will sit up straight in your desks because that's how it works. How is it that you can't fire people? How is it that the only recourse I have is to vote for somebody every 6 years? We got a guy that can't make the dress code in the Senate. He just refuses to wear a suit. He wears a hoodie and shorts. And I'm not saying he should have to dress up. I'm saying they have a dress code. You won't do it. Have you ever been called on the carpet for not wearing a tie? Because I can remember those days. And the point being that if we, the citizens, the people that elect them to office, do not have the authority or the wherewithal to hold their feet to the fire and remove them if that's what needs done, then it's no wonder we have problems. We have to hire good people. That's the election. And then we have to supervise them. That's the grand jury and the militia and having them in the district. How's having them in the district help? Every criminal knows a good way to escape justice is to jump jurisdiction. So if we go live in a city state in the East Coast, probably the state isn't going to, put a hook in us and bring us back. Also, the federal courts are under the jurisdiction of Congress. Congress decides what federal courts can and can't hear. So we want to bring them back and have them deal with the state courts where they live and are elected. Once that's done, we're then going to play a game called Where Did You Get the Authority to Do That in the Constitution?
This is the part I How do we shrink the size of our behemoth, our Leviathan?
Well, what's the authority for the Department of Justice? It was one guy, half-time, temporary placement. What's the authority for the EPA? Richard Nixon, 1972 executive order. What's the authority for BLM, which abuses the folks out west? What's that? I mean, the Bureau of Land Management. Some people don't want their land managed. You know, that's what Clive and Buddy said. I never asked them to manage anything. I was managing it myself. Thank you. They
How
just
about the,
automatically come in and bill me.
I mean, but we've got, yeah, you start going down the list, everything from Social Security to bloated military. I mean, if you think let's just take the military for a moment. Nearly 800 bases in foreign countries. That when basically the military itself is a country. That is lock, stock, and barrel. It is a country. It has satellites all over the world. It is basically its own entity. Now, it's supposed to be under our government, but the fact is it lives for itself and its taskmasters. And it has nothing to do with the song that I was playing at the very beginning, Freedom. We have colonies all over the world right now in the form of military bases. How, with what we're doing here, could we really literally say they're done? You're over with. We're pulling out. And by the way, yeah, that means a lot of people are going to be out of work for a while until we go to a peacetime economy. Because that is the biggest, I think, the biggest reason why a lot of people wouldn't want to go along with what we're doing here is because when government shrinks, we're talking probably 75 to 100 million people are going to be affected directly, because that's probably how many people actually have contracts and or work for the government right now. So talk to me about that hurdle.
Well, either we're going to enforce the Constitution or we aren't. There's no sort of pregnant. It's one or the other. It's binary. There is no constitutional authority for a standing army.
No,
Congress has the authority to call forward a militia for 2 years at a time, and then they could reinstitute it. The reason we went with militia, not a standing army, is we didn't do what you just described. The founders did not want us to be an empire. The histories of empires are not good. They're not good while they're empiring, and they're not good during decline. You know, many things are being done in your name around the world. It makes you wonder why they hate you. But it's being done in your name, and you don't even know it many times.
yeah, we're an empire, by the way. We are the empire. We're at the what you call the tail end, and it is doing all it can to maintain its position in this world. We are the empire. The British handed it off to the United States
Yep.
after World War II.
You know, good, bad, or indifferent, things like reinstituting tariffs was probably a good idea as far as raising revenue. Reinstituting the income tax, because it was tried before, is unconstitutional.
Yeah.
Why am I cutting a check for this stuff? I cut a check to fund the UN so they can give money to NGOs who give money to the cartels who bring people to the border and ferry them across that I fund. No, no, no. Why am I allowing that to be done? More to the point, why is everybody else allowing that to be done? And I look into the camera quite often. I say, when will it be bad enough for you? Sitting at home eating your popcorn, when are you going to decide that you need to take action? What will be enough? You know, I was at a symposium over the weekend listening to the numbers of people that have been brought across the border. I believe there's currently 85,000 children they can't account for. They don't know where they are. Discussions about the empty Walmarts that are being used to house children, how children are taken to quote unquote foster homes where nobody's of the same nationality. How does that work? There's no relative there. There's no, and you know, we turn our heads. We don't want to talk about this stuff. It's uncomfortable to talk about what might be happening to those children. How come you can illegally cross the border without a vaccine, but if you live and work here, you have to have one?
Right in
And
the midst of what we just went through, that was going on. Yes.
and doesn't that give credibility to the idea that they're trying to bump off the residents and replace us?
Oh, I
And
know.
maybe they are, and maybe they aren't. What's the constitutional authority for any of it? And I use this example. You come home, you left a teenager in charge, you find a 3-year-old coloring a permanent marker on the wall, 12-year-old's in the basement putting off firecrackers or something. The teenager comes more or less from the direction of the liquor cabinet, says, "Hey, while you were gone, we passed a moratorium on spankings." Sure you did. Sure you did. And
Yeah,
we're going to honor it too. Uh,
that is our government. That is our country. That's exactly
but
it. By the way, we don't like the guys next door, so we're going to hire these thugs to kill them for us. And and by the way, they have their thugs that they want to kill other people they don't like. We're going to send them money to do that. It's like, I mean,
we simply there's two tools that criminals use, delinquents, if you will. One is division, I've addressed. The other is distraction. What can I get you to look at? And so the Friday document dump is one. Because you're not paying attention on Friday, so we'll put actual things out that you should be aware of, but you're not going to pay attention. Or look over there, there's aliens, or oh, the Super Bowl's now, or any number of things that cause me to look away. Mike Murdoch says that most men fail due to broken focus. Well, that would be true here. Keep your eye on the ball,
mm-hmm.
mind your own business, all those things, they say the same principle. And as I go about addressing groups vicariously or live, I keep coming back to this central thing. We have just about the kind of government we deserve based on how much attention we pay to it. You want to keep weeds out of your garden? Better look at it periodically and get down there and pull some weeds periodically. Want to get in shape? That's going to require some attention. Want to read through the Bible in a year? That's going to require some attention. It amounts to assessing and establishing priorities and then sticking to them. And again, working backwards in history, the great people that gave us this gift. It's a gift. We've squandered it.
Yep.
It was given to us.
Yep.
They wrote to Federalist Papers to try to explain to the people that had to accept the new government, to try to explain to them how it was going to work. And these were editorials put in the papers. And I like to picture the farmer coming in after a full days of physical labor, eating by lantern or candlelight, reading the Federalist Papers one at a time. I would say that would challenge most college students today to read and comprehend those Federalist Papers. And yet these people, at that time, they were familiar with Federalist paper, suggested legislation, current and previous court cases. They knew what was going on and had an opinion about it. I like Trump. I don't like Trump. I think Trump's got ugly hair. I think nothing of substance, nothing said of substance. Have you met the man? Because our state is such, I think there's 60,000 people in the district for our state representative. I know him. I have a cell phone number. He's been here many times. We talk about every 2 weeks in depth. And there was a point when he was running for office, I put him in the truck and we went for a drive. His people came here after the revolution too. They were granted a tract of land because his ancestors service in the Revolutionary War. And so we had that in common. And we talked about principles. What do you believe in? He doesn't get all off in the weeds about parties and stuff. He says, I know what I believe, and that guides my voting. And he says, if they don't give me time to read it, I'm against it. If it's a compound bill, I'm probably against it. If it's a good amendment trying to fix a bad bill, I'm against it. He's against everything. He's like Mikey from the Life commercial. He hates everything. I believe he currently leads the legislature in no votes.
Now, who's
Good.
this again? Who's this again?
He's our state representative from my little part of the world, guy named Dallas. He's a fine young man. Uh, uh, I had an extended chat with him. I said, we're going to send you all the way to Harrisburg, and I am not going to pretend that I have read the legislation you're looking at, and I'm not going to tell you how to vote on it. I'm going to rely on you and your principles, but I want to know what they are before I vote for you. What do you believe in? Who are you? How do you feel about it? And we talked about things that I think are meaningful. I said, now, when push comes to shove, you're going to have to make a decision and live with it. Okay. And you don't have to explain it to me per se. I'm not your boss, while you're voting. I'm your boss when I'm voting. But that scale of government still works, provided we take the time to get to know the people we're elected. It works at the county level. There's 80,000 of us in the county. I know the commissioners. I know the sheriff. I know the DA played football with his dad. I know the prothonotary, had him in school, I guess, homeroom or something. And it just goes like that. You start knowing all these people. Boy, does that make a difference. And I guess that was a point I wanted to raise earlier. Culturally, the change that was made was we raise our kids and then they finance their education. And then they can't find work in their community, so they go live apart from their family. When you enroll at Penn State, and I'm sure it's elsewhere, one of the things you can do while you're getting your classes at 18 is sign up for a new credit card. So now you've got student debt, credit card debt. You meet somebody at college, perhaps, and you settle down. She's got credit card debt and student debt as well. You need a couple of cars because you both have to work to pay your debt. You're going to live in a house that you never pay off on a cul-de-sac where nobody's home all week in a community away from your family. And then in 15 or 20 years, it's going to be necessary to move to another place where you don't pay for the house. And so we end up dispersing the very resource that we need to have assembled. Assembly is the key skill here. The Native Americans in the winter would get together in the Great Lodge around the fire, and the old ones would tell the history of how the people came to be, and the young ones would listen to it. And annually, it was more or less the same story, but that's how culture was transmitted. We strive to do that here. Our next event will be Memorial Day. I believe we'll have macaroni salad for Memorial Day, probably grill outside. Maybe they'll play badminton. We'll look at the new baby, and everybody will have their dog. And we'll talk about maybe little things that are important, maybe big things that are important. But we will assemble and we will talk, just like people used to do.
Right.
We chose to live here and raise our kids. We were a one-income family, which was an anomaly. Somebody said, well, how did you get by with less? I said, are you kidding me? You think I have less? We raised our kids. That sounds like more to me. There's a change in thinking that has to occur. That's all I know. And if current conditions don't motivate that change in thinking, wait a year or two, it'll get worse. If that's what you want to do. I don't want it to get any worse. While I have the energy to resolve this, I want to resolve it. Now, I said I'm the numbers guy. I'm here to tell you, you can grow your chapter in 30 seconds. I have a 30-second spot you can share with people. It says very simply, you mind if I ask you a few obvious questions? Do you think there's too many criminals in government and not enough public servants? How would you answer that?
Of course. Yes.
Do you think the criminals could use consequences and the servants could use some supervision?
Yes.
Do you think somebody should do something about it for once?
Yes.
That's why I joined Tactical Civics. It's a set of solutions for that set of problems. If I sent you a web link, would you open it up and at least watch the 13-minute video? And I'll send that to you. Here's what I found when I joined Tactical Civics. I did that. I said they were telling me I had to read the book, and I did. I read multiple books, and I needed to learn all this stuff, and then I could talk to people who would then learn. I said, that'll take forever. why don't we send out the video that has the basic information in it, and then we can all learn together, because it'll be quicker. I found the following to be true. I sent one video out every day in the month of April last year. 10 people joined. 1/3 joined based strictly on nothing I said beyond what I just said to you, but those 3 questions. 1/3 of the public has their head in the sand, don't want to get involved. They're going to pay the cannibals to eat them last. They just, no, they're busy, whatever. 1/3 of the public is choosing one of the other spokes on the wagon wheel for solutions. Hide in the woods, hide in an enclave, open civil war. What was the other one? Abdicate their citizenship, give up their passport, which perhaps as a defensive strategy might work, but it doesn't solve the problem. Party politics, convention of states, which would be great, but you didn't enforce the first constitution, so I don't believe you'll enforce the next one. Candidate of choice, he's the best candidate ever. What do we do after that? Boy, I was thinking there was another one of those options. And then
Expat. You leave your country and you go somewhere else.
yeah, go live in Costa Rica, which sounds nice. Retirement in Costa Rica or Belize, eat a lot of chicken. Okay, I could go for that. Absentee vote, but what about the people I'm leaving behind? What do I do for them?
Yeah.
And what's my obligation? I'm a steward up here. I own the farm, and I don't have a badge or a plaque or anything that says owner, but I have it burned into my psyche that I'm the steward around here. And so if things aren't getting done, I feel this tremendous compulsion to get them done somehow, whether by influence or by action. And it's my objective to transmit to the next generation soil, water, air, wildlife, timber, whatever, just like you're wrestling with on the farm you're dealing with. So too is it up to me to bestow the gift upon them that was given to me. That's stewardship. I have that for the country too.
Yeah.
I grew up, if you watch the Andy Griffith show, Opie and I are about the same age. Cane pole fishing at a pond. They turned us loose on horseback as kids. We'd take off all day with the dogs, and it was just a wonderful life. It was just a wonderful life, what we did and could do and still can do. In my day, some of my classmates walked to school. Nobody walks to school anymore. Some of my classmates walked home for lunch and walked back. Nobody walks home for lunch anymore. I don't care if it's a bus for one. It's just to say that it's a different world doesn't really describe it. I gave my son a rifle at 9 years old, turned him loose, gave him assignments. And somebody said, do you feel that was safe? I think it's safer than an iPhone.
Yeah.
What if he shot somebody? I said, what if pictures you're taking you don't want put on the internet? How about that? Number one way for predators to find your kids is through the iPhone, or not just iPhone, but it's a cell phone, the interweb, and so on. The tactical civics route provides me an opportunity to do something about the problem and do it now and do it in relative short order. Like I told you, we've grown by a factor of 12x since the last year. And in part because some of us have decided to pick up the pace. Let's go. What are we waiting for? Let's do it this way. You can move at whatever pace you want to move, and you can know all about it first and then move, which is still recommended. We are one of the largest county chapters in the Republic. We had been the largest. We're I think 2 people behind right now, or we'd be the largest county in the Republic. We shot to 100 so fast it made people dizzy. And my question was, do you really think I knew that much, that we grew that fast? Because I just was so well read. Couldn't, at the time, it didn't work. No, it's because we leveraged some tools and, made this thing happen. That's all. That's all. We had been the biggest state. Other people are also innovating elsewhere. And so one of the things we do as an organization is get together and collaborate. What are you guys doing down there that's working so well? And then we try to share these ideas back and forth and so on. We are also at a transition point, I believe, where we're moving away from vicarious meetings, which we did a lot of, and we are now moving to more in-person meetings. And so this week in our county, we'll have a county chapter meeting. And that's where, you break bread, you talk to people, you build relationships, you transmit information, you recruit, because at some point we're going to have to muster and move our ordinances and so on forward. And so we're going to muster now. Just it makes sense to do it that way. I usually get asked, how many counties have you done this in? None. Why not? We are going to move in concert. Many counties in many states, all in the same 30-day period. We're not going to be demonized and marginalized by going one at a time.
I was going to say that's a key.
Yeah, our county has something called the Sheriff's Posse. Like 420 some of us that joined the Sheriff's Posse. This is a group of volunteers with a card and a hat and a shirt and a clean record, who, if the sheriff needed us, could call on us. It's usually for traffic control, during a parade or something, or to make a visible presence. He's identified 20 or 25 law enforcement backgrounds. If convicts escaped, they might call those people specifically. They did training on looking for lost people. If somebody gets lost in the woods. It seemed very practical. Boy, it didn't play well in the media that those people have a posse. What a bunch of rednecks they must be up there. So, and okay, take your shots. But when we're many counties in many states moving in the same 30 days to restore something we always had, the market pressure will be very positive for us. And it'll eliminate some of the detracting points.
Well, I think the some of the key points that we've been covering here is start right now where you're at and get to know your local representatives, be it the city, be it the county, be it the state. Make your voices heard with those individuals. Hey, you're doing a good job here. You're doing a bad job here. Hey, did you understand here? Here's an article related to this. Have you thought about the outcomes? Get to know them face to face when they come to your township, when they're back at home. Go out for coffee with them. That's the step one you can do. And you start speaking into their life. Step two is, and that's what you can do right now. Step two, in the midst of this, is sign up for Tactical Civics and start educating yourself on the actual roadmap, the actual way to make an even larger long-term results-based impact within the greater community that you live in and ultimately to our United States. And then three is to communicate that with those that you know, and help people that, hey, you're involved with this, you're involved with that. Here's what I suggest you do, because you're right. I remember this was 3 years ago. There was a bill here in Washington State to prevent natural gas from being hooked up to new buildings. Well, I found out about it, got on there, sent it off to 2 or 3 people. And other people did the same thing, and it didn't pass. Well, guess what? It just passed this last year. And by the time you heard about it, it was too late. They had already slipped it in. So we in Washington State have what we call referendums and initiatives. So there is a very wealthy individual who's decided to dedicate millions and millions and millions of his dollars to organize and write up and create and educate and train individuals to take these initiatives out in the public. So this last summer, we had 6 initiatives that were out, and people were, okay, I can sign for that. Yes, yes, yes. Nah, I don't want that one. Okay, fine. 3 of them just got passed through in-house while they were still in-house. They got passed. 3 of them will go on this fall. We actually interviewed him on another podcast that I produce here locally. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, we've got to do we got to do this one with the natural gas because we had the carbon tax and all that stuff went on. And he goes, you're right. We probably need to get that one going for the next round because these do-gooders have an agenda that they've been given from basically the UN, and it's passed down to the Fed, down to the state, down to the county, down to the city. And it's all UN. It's all Agenda 21. It's been in the works for decades. And that's where all this climate stuff comes from. It's not, they didn't invent this. They didn't wake up one day and go, oh, there's something wrong with the climate. There's nothing wrong with the climate. This is an agenda to higher tax, manipulate your ability to make choices, and a whole bunch of other agendas. And they've been indoctrinated. So I'm saying, had I been involved with my representatives and enough people involved with their representatives, we could have staved off this latest round of votes that went through to basically say, no, you can't hook up natural gas to new homes and new buildings, which if anybody knows anything about natural gas, it's natural, it's gas, and it's the cleanest burning fuel out there. So what I'm saying is, to sum things up, is be active where you can right now, join your group and get involved, because you're right. There's a lot of different people that are like, well, we're going to do the this group and that group, and there's a lot of people trying to grasp, Bill, what's going on, and they're trying to learn how to take law. They're learning law, how to do lawfare, how to do so. People are. I never heard of any of this stuff, Bill, 5 years ago. I didn't know of anybody doing anything other than just say Republican, Democrat, Independent, Republican, Democrat. Now there's people that are doing what they're just, you've seen the same thing, Bill, right?
Yep, I've been through most of it. The what's happening, what's causing it, how do we solve it? What's
Yes.
happening, what's causing it, how do we solve it? David Zuniga says ungodliness is the problem. We need to repent. What do we need to repent from? Well, certainly turn away from sin. Repentance is a change in attitude and a change in behavior. That's what repentance is. We cannot neglect our civic duties any longer. We must repent of that. The people. Now, we have the collective sovereign, not the individual sovereign. We have to deal with this. And if we don't, our grandkids will have to deal with it, and it'll be our fault. And no, I would rather fail than do nothing. And it's that simple for me. Like, this is hard. I've reached a stage in life where if I have any wisdom, I'm supposed to share it. Here I am. Let's get this done. I was listening to what you said about the bill on the natural gas, and I was thinking, in the Declaration, it says we have the right to life, liberty. It says among these, which means there's more than what they list: life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And then it says, to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. So do I not have a right to keep warm? Where is it a purpose of government to tell me my fuel source again? I can't cook with what? What if that? Sri Lanka, for those people, is a really interesting study. They went whole hog green and destroyed their economy, and then the people went out and stripped the landscape of all the vegetation because that's all they could get to burn. So maybe they ought to go ahead and let us use electric and gas, and if they really care about the environment like they claim they do. And you're right, it's not about the environment, it's about control.
Yep.
It's always, I have a friend, he said, in the history of society, the elites have always attempted to control the productive capacity of the masses.
Yes.
If we use Adam Smith's construct, land, labor, and capital, first they simply owned the labor, slavery. You work for me, I'll pay you the minimum, barely enough to keep you alive. Christianity broke the back of slavery.
Yes.
So they went to the land, the feudal system. The ruling powers owned the land, and you could live here. I'll protect you, but you got to work my ground. You can have a piece of ground, give me half your stuff. And the Industrial Revolution seemed to free that up. People moved off the countryside into the cities, and the quote is, in the city air, even the serf breathes free. Start a donut shop or something. And for about 400 years, the elites looked at how can we control them, and they hinged on capital. They control the money supply. The next level of that is going to be digital currency.
Yep.
They can control what you buy, when you buy it, where you buy it, how far from your house you go to get it. No, no. I did not give permission for that. I just didn't give permission. And since I didn't give permission for that, we're not going to do it. If I must do something else, I shall. What do I have? I've got a daughter who's a hairdresser. I said, you can trade haircuts for anything.
That's right.
It's a universal currency. Somebody wants their haircut. What kind of chickens do they have? Because that'll work.
So, an example of that is during the fanatical medical martial law that we were put under here in Washington State, and having to wear a mask when you went and got your hair cut, blah blah blah. Well, it turns out my neighbor is my neighbor, and she's owned her own beauty haircut thing in her house for quite a long time now, and she would mask up because that's just her personality. But none of my family and I masked up, and we'd go over there and get our haircuts through the whole darn thing, and there was no problem. We paid her, she made a living, and it was interesting because none of my neighbors, we have a cul-de-sac, we'd talk, no one's wearing anything. It's you had a community, and they all may have they're more big government, believe what they're told kind of thing, but they could at least say, well, this is my neighbor, it's safe, I'm not going to worry about my neighbor, because and that worked. Now I want to switch real quick. Have you looked at, David and the rest of you, have you looked at partnering up with homeschoolers, private Christian schools, private Christian colleges, and bring this in as a curriculum? Because I would think this would be a wonderful adjunct part of learning civics. Because when I remember my son in elementary school learned the 3 branches of government. We went to the local Olympia, to the Capitol, met our representatives and everything, went into the Supreme Court, sat down, got explained to that. So that went on, but then that was about all that they really learned anymore. Is there thought about doing this? Because I would believe this would be a game changer if it started being taught in these environments, because not only would the teachers learn it, the kids would learn it, and you'd be talking now to tens of thousands, even possibly millions of people.
There is a textbook, Tactical Civics for High School, that can be used in any of those settings. And when you log into the training center, that should be something that you either do or will be able to do. Also, be aware that someone's going to call you and help you with
Yeah,
orientation.
they've tried to. I need to get back with them. It was over the weekend, so.
Wonder if it was Zach.
Yeah, it was.
Tell him I said howdy. If you have any problems with the training center, ask Zach. He'll tell you where to look and where to find. But in there, under library, you'll find audio books and PDFs, and you can download every book we've got and every audio book we've got for your same fee. Or you can get print from Amazon, but I recommend everybody download the books, and you should be able to find that Tactical Civics for High School in that set. I just started ordering books. I'd read the bibliography. Oh, I better have that book. Oh,
I'm the same way. I buy the hardback. I've got stacks at home, and I'm a hardback. I mean, a hardcover. I like the real tactical feel of a book, and I like to mark it up, and it doesn't bug my eyes like the computer after a
while. I've been doing a lot where I pull an excerpt digitally and forward it to people where that's useful for me to do. I think that there's been a loss of agency that people don't know who they are and what they actually, what their authority is here in a free republic. And of course, our training, I tell this story now. Lex is 20 now, but I remember when she was 4 and running through the grass on the hillside barefoot with her blonde hair blowing in the breeze, as free as can be. And then we sent her to something called pre-K counts, where they taught her how to stand in one place and behave till the rest of the group. They taught her a group management strategies. Well, they spend 12 years teaching them group management strategies.
I know. Look, in my book, Breaking the Deception Code, I list a whole chapter at the end, hope at the end of the tunnel. And I said, get your kids out of public school, if at all possible. Churches look at all the kids as a mission field, support families so they can go to a private school or they can homeschool.
Why wouldn't it be possible?
I'm guilty of having my kids, but we instructed them at home. We worked very hard to integrate all of our beliefs, all of our systems of thinking. And I have to say, I'm very grateful because all 3 of my sons is independent thinking. They get along. They love their parents. They love they're hard workers, and they look at what's going on and go, "This is nonsense." My oldest son is the one who's been showing me stuff ahead of time, and my middle son is just sucks everything up. He's my #1 fan, and we won't go any further. But Second Amendment rights are very big, and so I'm very grateful. But if I was raising kids, I told all my boys, we're putting money aside right now. We're investing in money aside. So when you have, Lord willing, you guys have kids and you want to homeschool and it's going to find it tough, we will augment that. If you want to do a private school, Christian, we will augment that because it's so important for us now to keep them out of the polluted programming that goes on. You and I, we were both products probably of public school, and we were programmed. Bell goes off, this. Bell goes off, that. That. Anyway.
That's Andrew Carnegie Training Factory.
I know.
Yeah. I talk about a breakover point with these things. Corporate medicine did us a lot of favors. We had a child with cystic fibrosis. We had some of the best medical care in the world in Pittsburgh, and we took advantage of it. She died in 2006. So what is that, 18 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
And we have continued to see some specialists in Pittsburgh for our own issues, whatever they may be. I've always said we're medical snobs because we've been to a place where, they invent things and leave the provinces. But it's changed to more of a corporate med approach. The lawyers and the administrators have taken over. The doctors are employees of a hospital as opposed to doctors. And they're not bad people. I understand their reality too. You make $250,000, you have a house and kids, and your boss says, do this, you do this. So it's changed. Education, when you went to school, was different. People brought money to school so they could finish the stocks down in woodshop. Nobody ever thought of shooting anyone. That just never crossed your mind. They taught practical skills like auto mechanics, auto body.
Yep.
Home ec was a real thing.
All of it.
You might learn boxing. My brother played a sport called boxing basketball, one glove and one hand to dribble. That was an interesting one. In gym class, everybody played. But things have changed now. Law enforcement, it used to be when kids got in a fight, they had to separate and something else. Police are called now. Police are in schools now. A fist fight at the bus stop is a crime. And there's something wrong when it's that way. And because it's changed, we must pull them out. Because it's changed, we must bring them home. And you can afford it. You cannot afford not to do it. Somebody said, the phrase is, in our rush to give our kids the things we never had, let's try to remember to give them some of the things we did have, like personal responsibility, accountability. You got to do your chores before, do your homework before you eat, and so on and so forth. Too many things cost money that pass for attention. My wife and I chuckle all the time about the things that went on here, the multiple kids in high chairs at the same time. Our daughter's favorite toys, especially during the dinner prep hour, were the pots and pans. And so they would come and get in the cupboards at her feet and drag stuff out, and assemble them, and so on. And she never said, it was fine with her, because it was fine. One of their favorite pastimes in the spring was to take the dandelions and pop the heads off, and then get a whole bunch of them and get cold spring water and peel back the stems and drop in the spring water. They'd make curlicues. Now, how much did that cost? And yet all of my kids and grandkids have done that as part of their entertainment. I put Miss Madison, sometimes known as Barbie's Revenge, in the four-wheeler, and we go for a ride. She says, "What are you going to tell me today? What am I going to learn?" "Oh, we're going to learn about alfalfa, clover, trefoil, and crown vetch, 4 legumes, and what they do." "Well, we're going to identify some trees." I went out once, 175 different flowering plants on one afternoon. Let's look at them. We live in a garden. Let's go out. Put your phone down. And it just goes that way. I'd rather they were raised with horses and dogs and a big yard. This was a great place to be a child, and a little lame to be a teenager was the consensus. But it was a great place to be a child.
Yeah, we're gonna get ready to wrap up, but I had the same. I grew up in a small town because my dad went to work for the refinery. There was a little place called Ferndale, Washington, and they had the refinery out there on the Cherry Point that took care of making the fuel for Western Washington. And then the next one came in, which was Exxon, and I was Arco at that point. So 2 refineries, aluminum company went out there, and so a lot of us our parents worked out there, so we were part of a new little community not community, but development. But I would play my backyard, my back gate was a hayfield, and then the woods beyond that. And then you went up beyond that, you had more hayfields, and then you came up to the next development. And then north of me, we had the trails, which was just old farmland and forested area that had one access road in, farm road, and then we had several access points that we went in and called trails that you could walk in. We had the kids, we all built trails in there. You rode your motorcycles, you rode your bicycles, you walked. People brought their tractors, their trucks, their cars, and did all sorts of stuff. Summers, all 4 seasons. Built tree forts. I had a Huckleberry Finn life. I and my neighbors, we would, from sun up to sundown, as long as you got home for dinner, that's all that mattered. Then you might go back out, and then you'd hear the Johan or the whistle, and it's like, coming, and you went home. I mean, I grew up with that. You grew up with that. And my sons grew up in a town where we didn't have the flowing areas, but we had like a little free area that was like down below and had a little bunch of trees and the brambles and stuff. And they're down there with their hatchets and their sticks and doing it. And then they got the airsoft guns and all that. So yeah, we built swords, and they would do sword fighting. And so they got to have some of that. And we did a lot of camping and hiking and traveling. But I want to wrap things up and bring it back to Tactical Civics. Folks, just go to tacticalcivics.com. That's where you go. And Bill, is there any final words you want to leave with us before I let you go that we haven't covered? Or
Oh, if there are, I'll probably be speaking about them Wednesday night on the Zoom we do called Results. You can find that in your Tactical Civics menu as well. No, go to tacticalcivics.com, watch Jeff Calhoun, press the red button and join. Look me up in the chat. All hands on deck. All hands on deck. It'll get better when you make it better.
well, I thank you so much. Thanks for coming on, Bill. This has been a wonderful time. And folks, thank you for watching and joining us. Remember to like and share the show with all your friends. And as I like to say, remember, be a lion and not the prey.